Alright, looks like we're live here. Thanks for tuning in, guys. And I guess thanks for joining me for another game development stream. This time, something a little different. I'm going to be doing some conceptual planning and art for this exterior environment. If I head over to this scene here, you can see this is the new space. Basically, sort of an outside level where we are outside of the city walls, and there is an entrance to an underground area here. This is a mesh that will become our elevator, sort of for entering underground ruins, things like that. But it's a little boring and lacking for my taste right now. So the plan today is to head into sort of like a drawing mode, really. Whoops, wrong scene. Here we are. Okay. Just turn down my volume a little bit. And get my Cintiq pen, set up my drawing space. Okay, so here you can see I have this just a pretty simple piece of canvas here. I have a profile view for planning and a top view. And, and basically what I'm thinking of doing is, if this here is the gate, that is strange. Hope my drivers are okay for my Cintiq. Well, they should be. Shouldn't have any issues here. Oh, that's a little awkward. My apologies, guys. Give me 1 minute while I sort this stuff out. Alright. Sorry about that, guys. Alright, let's continue here. Basically, like a goof, well, like a noob, I guess. I haven't used this software in a long time. Bought it a while ago as sort of like an alternative to Photoshop in terms of drawing, like a cheaper alternative. but I like using it every now and again because it has a very nice feel for organic drawing. And Photoshop can do that, but this feels, for me, uh, in my opinion, it just feels a little bit better if I'm doing purely just organic, expressive work. Um, Anywho, so you can see here this profile view, we have our city wall right around here, in this area, and we have like it's probably some sort of rubble, you know. Um, you probably want like a little bit of debris falling off. These are sort of, if you can imagine the city had two walls before, maybe this one is kind of like broken. Just it's a bit more lived in, something like that. You got like a little bit of a tree there. I mean, the space is kind of surrounded by trees, but in the profile view, we're just kind of breaking that apart. I got a bit of color here, so I can break up this. Um, yeah, make it a bit more easier to read. Let's just grab some sort of green. Yeah, without a doubt, it's a little rough, but you guys get the idea here. So hopefully that makes it a little bit easier to read now. So I was looking at some reference online of like tunnel entrances and subway entrances for this element here, and basically, like what I'm thinking of doing is probably having a nice, this is kind of like a futuristic space. I mean, it's not a sci-fi world, but um, I do like the hexagon aesthetic. Well, I prefer it over just the square. I mean, I think also it's just more interesting to begin with. This is a shape, but um, seems like the trends are in the future things just have more sides. If we can have some bolts in these corners, there's probably a frame in the back, right? This would possibly hang off like this. So what do I like more? 2, 3, probably. Yeah, let's just erase that. I suppose 1 is fine. On the back side, I think it would have a sort of eye structure. You can sort of imagine that. This will go straight. And in terms of a graphic style, we could have an arrow. An arrow on the sign, basically saying, hey, head down here. And in terms of text, you'd want to have, access, tunnel. Of course, in a cool font. Yeah, you want almost like boring there. And obviously like a cooler arrow. But I think a nice way to break up the logo might be to have it in the middle. I mean, it could also be just way smaller. Definitely can't play with the composition in that aspect. So if we take a look at our space, let's head back over to the monitor focus. Where are we here? So I don't love this layout, how it's perfectly symmetrical. I think it might be better served if we have the one. I think this would have to be much smaller, because it's going to be not perfectly symmetrically broken walls. I mean, these are just placeholders anyways. Let's grab my my terrain tool here, not my terrain, my foliage tool, and just begin to sprinkle a little bit more foliage throughout, just kind of playing with the space, getting some feel, just sort of testing it out, seeing how it feels to walk around in the space. There's too much empty space down here. I think we're going to close this off probably with some cliffs, kind of like how the old area was. You guys might have seen on a past stream, we had an exterior environment that kind of got lost and destroyed between the computer switch to like my new workstation, which is a bummer, but let's see here. I should close this off a little bit. Wonder if we can start facing this way instead. And just sort of make sure that it's composed in the right way. Like if you're exiting a city, this is your view. Don't quite like this. I have to shift that over. Something a bit like that. Just occluding this out of view, I think, might help keep things a bit more interesting. So that as players travel through the level, more information is revealed. I mean, it feels funny calling the level such a small space, but I guess the map. Hey Julio, how's it going? YouTube changed its appearance, eh? How so? I'm not aware of this. Did I just miss it when I turned on, or when I went to the site? Let's see here. Okay, so I'm going to apply a texture onto here. I probably can just grab this and stick that on here. And it's super small. You probably want to scale that up at least a little bit. That's better. So this is the city wall texture as it is right now. It's on the other side of the, like in the city level. I mean, if we go there, you can see the same. Basically, it's heavily relying on a tiling texture, not too appealing in that regard, right? Here we have, you can see it, right? It's just repeating all throughout. I'm not too in love with the fact that that's how it is. I think you definitely want to have a little bit of design elements to break that up. And I would prefer, I'm thinking of something more architectural, not just like wear and tear. Like the actual architecture should be a little bit more, or a little bit less repetitive. Maybe something like this would look cool. Kind of like these walls are, they're probably too short, to be honest, but I mean, this is placeholder geometry anyways. So what I want to build down onto, if I take switch back to my Cintiq view here, is that I'm trying to create this underground, almost like how we have subway entrances, right? I mean, this is a sub-access tunnel type deal, and there would be, if this was a side view, you'd have like a not ramp, but you'd have stairs going across here, right? Something like this, and you have a little bit of a landing. And then you'd have your elevator or whatever. Alright, so you gotta put this underground. I can move this out of the way. Or can I cut it and paste it onto a new layer? Just call this sketch. Yeah, over here we would have your exterior, you'd have your walls. Let's see, we have a structure kind of, and this would be the actual, it's transparent. We're gonna break it. This would actually be the ground level. And if you'd want to have it domed or rounded off a little bit. It's sort of a structure like this. You'd have your sign would drop down here. I wonder if I should build this out of our girders that I've been using through Haven Lock City, seeing as that's sort of like their primary building material. I've used it in all sorts of the architectural elements of the city. So these girders that way, this way. So what's in glass? I'm gonna head over to another monitor here and look up some reference on Google for, subways or tunnel entrances. See what we can get here. Okay, so temporarily, let's merge with layer below, cut those two. Paste these back in here. Yeah, let's bring this down more into view. And create a little bit of breathing room here. So I think on this side we don't have to be so tall. We'll probably do something like this to just break up the shape a little bit. I think we do want this to be a glass structure because you do want light to come in. I think you do want to be able to see the sky throughout, which would be pretty cool. If you come up from the underground, you can see the sky above you through the panels. I think this flat portion over here is a bit too small. Let's grab that lasso too. We'll bring that over here a little bit. Now let's grab this view here, copy this. Let's merge this with the layer below, and I guess rename this as more clear. Entrance. And at this height we have our we have those back panels showing in the back here as well. And it has some steps breaking that up. This would that seems more natural from a support perspective. Those, okay. Yeah, something. Yeah, this seems a little bit better. You probably do want your lamps, some sort of light fixture built by the city. Should it be? What I'm thinking of is, should these, if we have some street lamp structures, should they be mounted in sort of like this, providing light, or should it be, offset a little bit? You would have your street lamp or whatever. Let's take a look. Let's switch back to my monitor here and sort of begin modeling this out. Let's grab a new, maybe not a box. So how should we build this out? We could get right into the texture tool. Right now this is a terrain, so we could kind of sculpt a hole for this. Very, very strange looking shape. Let's grab the flatten and just grab this point here. Oh, the trees. It's like a, what is that called when that happens? Landslide? I didn't know the foliage behaves that way on terrain. That's really cool that it's adaptive like that. That tree's stuck down there. We'll quickly get rid of him. So this might be a bit too deep, but just for the sake of blocking in a level, let's grab a box. And I do not want this texture at all. Let's just clear that out. So let's put on a floor here. We can tighten this up real low, like 20, and go like 1,000 by 1,000. Well, I guess that's really create that so we just fill in the space. And you know what? For now, this is all these three meshes are gonna be set up to work like with as an actor dynamically. But right now they're separate meshes. Let's just right click. Can we just group these? Beautiful. Yeah, it would sit approximately something like this. And that might be way too shallow. I think grab some stairs too. Why not? Oh, I gotta stop clicking on that material when I make geometry. I'm not sure how wide these should be. Wide enough. You gotta think it's gotta be comfortable. Its subway entrances are pretty big. Yes, Julio, it is the old elevator that was kind of weird and out of place from the downtown level, but I think it's more appropriate and aesthetically appropriate for the entrance to the access tunnel outside the city. Good eye, though. I'm impressed that you noticed it without its original texture. Okay, so let's play with these settings here. Stair length. Stair height. Might be a bit too aggressive. We'll see how it feels. Number of steps. And you know what? Let's just grab our player start. Bring that over here. Okay, so definitely wide enough. Definitely accommodates space. You probably want it a little bit smaller even. We'll let the width of the space be dictated by, and probably increase the step length a little bit. Grab our sculpt tool. Where are we? Make sure it's set to flatten. And you know what? I want to make that a really sharp fall off. It's been a little while since I've used this tool, so it's a little rough around the edges in terms of my execution. How about we just set the snaps to 10? Should be a little bit better. The top view. Yeah, it looks approximately centered. Just using the grid as a guide. Actually, a little bit of walking room before this lift. Perfect. And back on the sculpt tool, let's flatten this geometry to be a little bit more in line of the Yep, nice and no, fairly neat. I have to raise this a little to make this a bit bigger. I actually did not mean to open that. I'll leave that area as is for now. Head back over here. Let's make this pretty. Well, might be a tad too aggressive. And make these our placeholder girders, just to see how this sizing is going to feel. I'm just sort of proxying out the level here. Just referring back to my sketch from earlier. These are just way smaller. Sort of situated like this. I'm not going to make it perfectly like hexagonal, like the plan had it. Oh jeez. That's awkward. We'll just place this along here. Might be a bit too steep. I'd rather do this over here than build it in Maya or 3ds Max and then have to import it and bring it in and change it and bring it back, and too much back and forth. Work in Unreal where we can. Yeah, where's our start point? Exit the city, probably around here. And then you have that structural element right there. Look at that tree sticking through. Yeah, then you have your underground entrance, run down. From a height perspective, I think that's fine. I don't think it's too much. Well, maybe it is. Who's that tall, right? But actually, we have to consider that we're going to have that sign hanging down as well. Right? I mean, if it's probably about 600 units. Is something like this. And if I just grab some streetlight actors. So my thoughts are having, this type. Yeah, maybe these are too tall. Maybe the structure's too tall, is what I mean. Or we can have this kind of street lamp, sort of like sconced out from here, which has its own appeal, I think. Might be better to have these mounted ones, that way the structural and man-made elements are all contained into towards the entrance. Where are we? Yeah, I think that height's actually fine now that the sign is in place. It doesn't look as strange. That's cool. You come out of the elevator here. This would be the approximate start location if you're exiting that environment. And you have this nice view of the tree line, evening sky, or whatever time of day it is, the sky in general, because this will all be glass paneled. Probably a nighttime soundscape without without birds chirping. Maybe just like crickets. Like a nighttime outdoor ambience. I think for daytime this environment sound effect is fine. Okay, so looking back at this environment here, I'm going to slide this a bit further back. Now that we have the space kind of carved in for these meshes, I can go back to the foliage and more accurately carve the space out. We kind of have that element defined. Well, a bit more defined. There may be some changes with the modeling, but more or less will fit into this space. Now the trees aren't going to be this aggressively close. I'm just sort of marking the playable, explorable space with them, with the tree line. Because we are going to have a dense grass in front of them that would actually mark out that space, and then behind that would be the unexplorable tree line. One thing I do have to do is build some sort of a really low level of detail version of these trees where I can use them, because I don't want to. Sorry, words are hard when I'm using Unreal and trying to narrate my thoughts. Basically, this is pretty heavy. Like, this is pretty dense. We have a lot of transparent shaders overlapping each other with this level of trees on this dense of a forest. So what I'd rather do is minimize it to like a few layers of trees and then have a really low poly tree in the background, almost like you'd have a stage in a school play, but with a better result. I want to find an effective way to sort of do that, because you really wouldn't want it to be thicker than a few. And what might be easier would be just to have the density reduced by half. So it's not this like super dense forest with maybe a bit too much overlap. That's closer to an acceptable density. I'm just going to reduce that again. Yeah, that seems far more reasonable. This is crazy. It's like trees within trees. And we also have to eventually build out a new terrain texture so we can paint in some, that's weird, some grassier areas, some dirt patchy areas, right? Within the grass, because this texture here isn't particularly too interesting. I mean, it's adequate. I like this thing a little bit better. Okay, let's head back into the drawing view here. I was just looking through some Google reference of subway entrances. Pretty cool stuff in different cities of the world. So what we could have here is sort of structural railing at railing height, and have glass exist, on these panels here. Is that message important? Oh, not really. Probably would need another support here, though. So I'm thinking of is these spaces, well, here, are going to be open. Better off to freehand it. Yeah, these are all glass panels. I think that immediately adds a bit more interest. Another option we could have is instead of the sign hanging down, you could have kind of a, I don't want to say like a gravestone, but kind of like a column, a square column made of concrete or something that sort of has the iconography for those entrances. Just another idea. I do like the idea of the sconces hanging off. I think that's the way to go. Just adds a little bit more to the silhouette, especially when you see it from the city entrance, the north gate. Super sketchy, messy artwork. Suppose it's time to plan a little bit more of the interior of this space, perhaps. Is it brick? Is it tile? Probably should be like a metal tile, I think. So, floor, concrete slabs, walls, metal tiling, struts, I guess, would be the metal girders and glass panels. That should actually be fine for defining those. I have some of those materials already set up, some, if not all, already set up in Unreal, where you can manipulate the colors and see what actually looks best dynamically, which is a pretty efficient way I find of working. I just saw your comment, Julio. I love the idea of Lord of the Rings style ruins, like the Mines of Moria. Is that what you're thinking of? Am I even saying that right? From the first movie, I think. I actually really like that scene in the movie. I guess we can begin to look more at these city walls. Try to merge this to the layer below. I should save as well. Maybe we'll create a new layer, and then I'll quickly go to Unreal and just grab a screenshot or just like a referential view and bring that here, sort of like a starting point. Yeah, so this is kind of the city walls. Maybe I can work on this sort of like a paint over or a draw over. That's pretty useful. It's a lot like Photoshop, but everything's in a different place. Okay. So what I'm wondering, I'll use these as a guide, I guess. We keep this center, and I wonder if we should shape things up, make them a bit more interesting. And we could still use these kind of struts to frame and embrace the wall, but so you get a little bit more depth in the design than just the flat shape that's been piled and repeated. Okay, I'm going to look at a little bit more reference. Okay, so here's one design element we could make use of. Let me just grab the pencil tool. So if this is our wall, we could do something where, you know, a portion of the wall is kind of steeper, use a little foothold. It still has to be steep enough not to allow the player to climb up it, right? But we can still add a little bit more depth in the design just by adding a little bit more geometry, which I think would go a long way. And then you would have the braces kind of, you know, beyond that. And then you could have material A and material B. I guess this would use material B as well. So then we would have to kind of change the material of our wall. And from the front, In the front we would have a shape like this. You know, just reimagining the built-in shape. So this would be B. An A exists here still. And then we have our actual gate, kind of like this. Yeah, side and front. For those confused. And right here would begin that slope. That might help a little bit at least. Look at it. It's just one concept. When they enter Gondor and are in the forest with the statues. I can't remember. What movie is that, Julio? Which movie is that? The second one? Is it where, like, Is it where... Shoot, I can't remember his name. The King. The Return of the King. Is it where he's fighting those wraiths? Man, can't believe I forgot the king's name. Aragorn. Is it where Aragorn... Oh, where Boromir dies. Gotcha. Looks like I may need to rewatch that movie. And we'll call it research. What might be another nice detail on the side view. Let's expand this out. You know, assuming this is kind of like a profile. If you were to imagine that this was actually a kind of... Not that I think players will build this up for players to explore, but just from a design, world-building, logic perspective, perhaps we want to potentially create this as if people could walk up on here. Kind of like how a lot of, you know, walled cities would operate. You'd have guards. Like if this was like a feudal times with, like, you know, protect your city, you'd have guards posted on here. So basically by adding this element we get a little bit more depth on that X, or on that axis that was previously just flat. I don't want it to look medieval. That's the only... I might be able to get like a third texture in here. Looks like we need a bit more space. Yeah, I don't think we need this all that much. Maybe we can reduce it a little bit. Just keep it up over here for reference. Probably off to the side. Another concept would be, let's extend this ground a bit more. So what if we had that trim at the top, right? Kind of a structure kind of like this. On the backside, inside the city, we would have our basic reinforcements, but on the outside, what if we reconfigure those braces to kind of almost like legs or pillars? That's kind of poor, but in terms of a silhouette, it might be more interesting. And then you could have fun negative space to run through if you wanted. potentially. I mean, I could just end up connecting like this. And then don't get to explore anything though, which I think is definitely less enjoyable. Not liking it all that much. Instead of creating that roof, we could just dedicate this block here to, type material C, let's say. Material B, B. Then in this case, the supports could go over. I think that's also a bit more interesting than what we have on our right. I mean, this is a cross-section that you wouldn't, or I mean, I'm looking at the design as a cross-section, which a player really wouldn't get that same effect, but still adds more depth variation. Just trying to draw some inspiration from some ancient walled cities. A lot of historical sites, but don't want to rely on it too heavily and make this look too much like a historical or a fantasy-based structure. I think this is what I'm going to go with. Should probably have a... Geez. I sort of a breakdown of the wall like this. And then it would carry through the same way. Actually, it's a little incorrect. That'd be the cross section, where B is the frame. So just think of this from a material perspective. Currently, like I mentioned, it's a bit too it's a bit too tiley, but not tiley, but the tiling texture is far too repeated. So what might look, well, what will look a lot better would be to break that up. But I still think I can make use of the texture. I mean, it is kind of like a logical way, and it does meet that kind of retro aesthetic, which I do want to maintain. Just a little bit higher here. Just trying to fully understand this shape. I probably don't want to tangent it directly. I guess I didn't. Well, this point should be here. Maybe this point should be a little bit higher. So we have a less confusing intersection of lines. I mean, we do have it here, but the material isn't changing, so I don't think it will be as much of a sin. E. That looks a bit better. Approximately. This isn't a perfect drawing, obviously. I think we have the same sort of cutout here. I think this would be far superior to the exterior walls we currently have. Yeah, whatever. Have our gate somewhere like this in terms of spacing. And the opposite side is like this. Gate. So it's definitely more interesting. Let's create a new layer on top. I save arc so far. It's saved, right? Yeah, it did. It's pretty fast software. I mean, my document size isn't that big though, to be honest. Let's add a little bit of color. Maybe we'll have to make a new texture or material. Use different material, maybe. So what I think we should have here is want to incorporate a bit more color into this, and seeing that it's Havenlock City, and Havenlock City does have that turquoise as their, well, it's a bit aggressive, as their city color. Maybe this trim up here could be that turquoise. And then we have our dark blue, whatever. It's gonna be hard to match the color because I decided to. That'll be better. And down here we could have, I think it's a contrast color to the off blue. We could have a off white, sort of beige yellow as like a concrete base. The next bit of, sorry, just what I'm thinking about right now is I want to incorporate a bit more of the green, or the city's theme color, into the wall, some sort of architectural element. I mean, an obvious place would be the struts, or I guess it would look like, whoops, this color here. I suppose this portion where the gate sits could also be the concrete. We just have to find a concrete that, or a material, build a material in a way where it looks like it's kind of logical for it to be stacked. I think that's the only real requirement of it. It's pretty versatile in its application. Okay, let's go back to the drawing side of things. Reduce the opacity there. So I think that we can get rid of these labels. I think what might look pretty cool will be to panel these up like so. I mean, I think like a close-up view of these details would sort of reveal that these panels will have this modeled in detail kind of like this. So it has actually quite a few edges to catch light. I mean, it'll be a metallic material, almost similar to those gates that we set up. It's actually a material that Unreal created specifically for what I'm calling Haven Lock steel. It's a bit more reflective than your regular metal, so well, I guess it's like a decorative metal. But that is sort of how the panels will be modeled, so it will be a little interesting. Yeah, they would carry on like that. Okay, let's see here. So for these struts, I think I do like that shape it does have currently, the depth. What I probably will need is a little bit of width of the bottom there. So it's a little add to the believability that it can act as a support, I think. Definitely gonna have to add some grass, to the wall. You don't want that hard cut. Let's see if I should figure this out. Can maintain these, which I think are good. Don't love it. I think that is vastly superior to what we have currently. Very cool. Okay. Took a while. So I hope that was semi-interesting for you guys watching. Just let me know, good, bad, more or less. I know usually development streams that I've done in the past are mostly Unreal focused. I mean, we did dip our feet into Unreal a little bit, working with the terrain tools um, and everything, but like the name of the stream says, much more of a design time. Anything? Just thinking if there's anything I'm missing and left out. I don't think so. I'll be posting updates on this environment throughout the day, probably on social media a little bit. Feel free to check us out on all the major platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all that good stuff. Beyond that, I hope you guys enjoyed the stream, and I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day. Until next time, see ya.